probably it's not really that necessary to go word by word and sentence verses by verses. In the early chapters, Śāntideva talked about the benefit of the bodhicitta, and then generating the bodhicitta. I know that the general understanding of bodhicitta is a mind that has the aspiration to enlighten all sentient beings, and applying the bodhisattva methods to achieve that goal, to enlighten all sentient beings. That is the general understanding of what bodhicitta is. And that is that's considered a very supreme mind, the most wholesome mind of all the mind. Then you have heard in the early chapters, you have already heard, and we will keep on hearing how such a vast and almost unfathomable determination is attainable through the mind training. At this point, such a determination, such a vast aspiration is almost impossible. And even if we do it, even those who dare to embark on this journey, many of us may think we do it on a very abstract and aspirational level, but we don't really practically believe that that is achievable. I mean, how can we enlighten all sentient beings when we cannot make one person happy or give them enlightenment for a day or for even an hour? To work with the sentient beings, to deal with their emotions, to live with their moods, to fulfill their desire, expectations, almost it's just it's not realistic. So this is why I will keep on repeating this. The bodhicitta is not merely this wish to, or not merely this aspiration to enlighten all the sentient beings. Bodhicitta, the big part of the bodhicitta is also understanding the truth. So let me give you this picture. So a bodhisattva have this aspiration to enlighten every sentient beings. We are not only talking about human beings. We are not talking about our own relatives or friends. We are not talking about human beings. We are talking about gods, demigods, asuras. We are talking about animals. We are talking about basically every sentient being that exists. We take these sentient beings as our responsibility, one's own responsibility, and we are not taking the responsibility of just giving them food and shelter, but we are taking a big responsibility, not only responsibility, but generating the determination, generating the vow to enlighten them, which means to make them understand the truth. Now, this is a daunting task. This is a time-consuming. Of course, even in the Mahayana Sutras, we are told again and again such kind of bodhisattva path takes countless eons, basically just forever. All these could discourage bodhisattvas, especially the young bodhisattvas, the beginner bodhisattvas. I mean, to enroll oneself to some social activities that benefit our small problems on this earth, and to volunteer and to get along with the people, to really fulfill the agenda, to fulfill the vision and the mission of that society, I'm sure many of you know, is very difficult. So how are we ever going to achieve this? This is achievable because of the wisdom of understanding the ultimate truth. In the ultimate sense, in the ultimate realm, there is no such thing as time. There is no such thing as space. There is no such thing as quantity. Like when we say all sentient beings, it sounds lots and lot. But what do we mean by lot of sentient beings? One sentient being, two sentient beings, lot of sentient beings. These are all mental distinctions that we are so habituated with, and we are so engrossed with, we are so fixated upon. So numbers could scare us, duration can scare us, the sheer amount of responsibility, sheer amount of discipline can scare us. So this is why the ultimate bodhicitta understanding is absolutely important to plant the seed of bodhicitta. Until you have, as long as you don't have this, even an intellectual understanding of ultimate bodhicitta, a bodhisattva will not necessarily become courageous, because bodhisattva will always be scared of, as I said, as I'm repeating, quantity, duration. And bodhisattva will experience fatigue. Bodhisattva will experience disappointment. Bodhisattva can get discouraged. So absolutely important in understanding the ultimate bodhicitta. To illustrate this, I have said this in the past also. For instance, when we help others without the bodhicitta, without the good ground on wisdom and method, even though we do it with a good intention, good heart, we do it with a certain goal. And with this goal, we get so fixated upon, we are so attached to the tools that we use, method that we use. We get so fixated upon the patient or the being that we are working with. And we have our own interpretation of what is success, what is failure, what is improvement, what is diagnosis, what is symptom. Based on that, we try to help others. And many times, our method of helping could backfire oneself, because what we think, little do we realize that this is one's own projection. So many times, like a psychiatrist could be helping a so-called abnormal person, and little realizing that you have created a goal in your mind a goal of normalcy, and you are imposing and forcing this upon this probably a normal person, much more normal than yourself. But you impose this, you use your own technique, and you are so much fixated upon time, success, diagnosis, symptoms, etc. And when things are not going according to the book or according to your plan, your method, and because you are so fixated upon so-called the goal, it could disappoint you, and it could not only harm the patient or the other being that you are trying to help, but your compassion, your love, your kindness could also end up becoming a cause to disappoint yourself, and you become sort of dependent. And not only that, you become sort of addicted to your method, your way of dealing with others, which you have decided as a kind act. And this is not a bodhicitta. This is a mere compassion and love. There's a very strong distinctions on this one. So it's we need to remember that we are talking about, when we talk about the bodhicitta, we are talking about ultimate bodhicitta and the relative to bodhicitta together. After knowing the benefit and the vastness and the greatness of such a bodhicitta, and now deciding that this is the only way to solve one's own problem, and not only one's problem, the problem of the world, and then generating the determination, taking a vow, a bodhisattva must apply the application of the bodhisattva according to the Buddha, without negligence, without delay. And I'm beginning with the fourth chapter, if you want to refer to, but I'm going to, as I said, I'm not going to go through each stanzas too much, since the stanzas is quite, since the text itself is very big, and if I dwell on too much on each stanza, we may end up being doing the Bodhicharyavatara for next 10 years. And it's kind of sad because, Śāntideva's Bodhicharyavatara, not only it offers us such a profound wisdom and a very, very viable, very doable methods, but his words and his construction of sentences are so poetic and beautiful. And I'm not doing any justice on that one. And that one, I'll have to outright tell you, I'm not going to. That one, preferably, those who are speaking Sanskrit, you should really take advantage of the language and read it yourself. This is a very beautiful text. I'm sure in the Sanskrit original text, original language is very beautiful. Even the translated version in Tibetan is very beautiful. At times, Śāntideva poetically is very, very sarcastic towards self-cherishing habit. At times, he's quite sarcastic towards other philosophers, which is very normal thing, by the way. The 9th chapter is full of argument with many other Indian Buddhist and non-Buddhist schools. And let's call them opponent. Our opponent, to whom we have argument, their argument represents our gross and subtle habitual patterns. So it's very important to understand the opponent's argument. But anyway, throughout the books, we will find sometimes a little bit of sarcasm. Whatever we do, it is a wise one will always do it after a careful analysis of this endeavor. Without a careful analysis, plunging into an activity or a path is only going to lead us to misery. So therefore, analyzing the path or the endeavor is foremost important. Again, we can really dwell on this shloka alone, how unique, this is very, I think I would say very unique Buddhist attitude towards the path. How a path should not be enforced to others and oneself without analysis. This is very much in the tradition of Buddha's advice on how we must always analyze and test the path before we take this path upon ourselves. But then immediately, Śāntideva sort of indicates, yes, you need to test, you need to analyze, but we kind of know, I'm sort of, summarizing this a bit. We kind of know that you don't have the time to analyze. And probably you are not so good at analyzing this anyway. So he's saying that so many great beings of the past have analyzed this single path of the bodhisattva, and they have all been happy with this. So he's telling us, you have, to the certain extent, analyzed, and you have also sort of obtained a little bit of conviction, but since we cannot really trust our own wit and the ability completely upon the result of our own analysis, let us remember, this path has been analyzed by the great bodhisattva of the past and the Buddhas of the past. And therefore, the path that you have chosen, the bodhisattva path, is a valid and beneficial path. Now that you have taken this path as your path, and now that you have pledged to enlarge all sentient beings, then you are deceiving all sentient beings. Even if a person promises to give something very meager and later decided not to give, Tathagatas of the past have said that such a person will be reborn in the hungry ghost realm. Here, as a bodhisattva, you have pledged to enlighten all sentient beings. And even to think of giving up the bodhicitta is the sort of the consequences of, even to think of giving up the bodhicitta is unthinkable. It's very negative. Only a Buddha can tell what can happen to such a being who wishes to give up the bodhicitta. I guess many of us, since we don't really understand the extent and the vastness of the bodhicitta, we don't really appreciate the gravity of or the sort of the consequence of giving up the bodhicitta. As you know, we can sort of understand, if we kill somebody, now that's really bad. If we steal, that's bad. If we lie, yes, that's also bad. But giving up the bodhicitta, now according to the Mahayana Sutras, they will say, in some of the Mahayana Sutras, this is what is stated: you could kill hundreds and thousands of beings, and you will have so much negative karma. But negative consequences of giving up the bodhicitta is far greater than killing thousands and thousands of people. So this we may not be able to appreciate. There's a stories like Ding Naga's story. Ding Naga is one of the great Indian Buddhist logician who wrote very important Pramana Buddhist logic texts. There's especially when he wrote Tsemakuntu, which is like the embodiment of all the Pramana Buddhist logic. At the beginning, he wrote a homage to the Buddha. And homage to the Buddha, in the words of the homage of the Buddha, he said, to the perfect being I prostrate, something like that. I bow down to the perfect being, Jebutsema, perfect being. And Ding Naga, like many great monks or the saints and the scholars of the past India, he was not wealthy. He was dwelling in the cave, and he used chalk to write his notes on the wall of the cave. And every time in the morning, he goes to town begging alms, and whenever he returned, he would find what he wrote all erased. And then one day he wrote, saying that if I'm writing this book with a profound intention to help so many beings. If you are just making pranks, don't do it, because this is beneficial. But if you find something is wrong here, then you must wait, because I will return once I beg alms. We will debate. So sure enough, one morning when he returned, there was this Tirthika. Well, in India, there's so many present day, we call them Hindus, but I think another sort of philosophy school master, he was waiting there to debate. And then they began the debate. And the opponent was a very, very accomplished logician himself. And actually, opponent's logic is, in today's world, you would really appreciate his logic. What he was saying is that there is valid and perfect measurement. There is valid and perfect logic, logic. Whether it's an inferential logic, such as if you see a smoke, you will know there is a fire. That's a perfect logic. Or direct cognitive logic, we call it. Like, I'm looking at marigold. This is a marigold. And the reason why this is a marigold is because I'm not drunk, I'm not drugged, I'm not crazy. And everybody sees this as a marigold. So when I see this as a marigold, and when we use this as a marigold, we are not using this as something else. So my perception of marigold is valid. The opponent's argument is such logic is acceptable, but there is a perfection of logic, perfection of measurement, perfection of other things, I guess very scientific, okay, like the size, perfection of size, perfection of duration, so on and so forth. But the opponent's main argument is there is no such thing as a perfect being. This is a very, very important study in Buddhism, in the Pramana Buddhist logic, because it's a very difficult to prove there's a perfect being. And here I'm getting a little distracted, but this is important. Again, when we talk about a perfect being, we are not talking about a God. Because when we talk about a God, then we are not using any logic to measure this God. We are talking about a perfect being that is within the human perceivable realm. I mean, in Dingnaga's homage was paid to the Buddha, Shakyamuni, and he considered him as a perfect being. And there's a lot of argument. For instance, what makes the perfect being? Is his body perfect? Is his mind perfect? Is his speech perfect? So on and so forth. A lot of Buddhist schools would say Buddha's body was not perfect because Buddha's body was a subject of conditions. He had to eat. He had to drink. Therefore, his body was dependent on cause and condition. If something is dependent on cause and condition, then that state of the body is not necessarily perfect. It is changeable, it is corruptible, it's manipulatable, so on and so forth. It's a very important argument. Is it possible to actually destroy all the defilement and become a perfect being? According to the Dingnaga and his follower, by the way, he had a big follower. His immediate disciple was named as Dharmakirti, one of the greatest commentator of the Buddhist logic. Defilement is destroyable. And this not only through the logic we can also experience. For instance, right now, we are not angry. I hope not. We are not always angry. We have aggression, but aggression comes when the cause and conditions are there. This proves that aggression is manipulatable. You can manipulate the cause and condition, then you can manipulate the anger, so on and so forth. With this kind of analysis and logic, you can prove that aggression, desire, passion, all this can be removed. Anyway, this is the text he was writing, and his opponent was totally in disagreement with that. So they had a long debate. Anyway, from the Buddhist perspective, from the Buddhist point of view, supposedly Dingnaga won the debate. And in those days, whoever won, whoever lost the debate, there's a tradition of following the winners, whatever, the doctrine or the school or the philosophy. But this guy refused. He was kind of a very stubborn person. Not only he refused, he was also kind of not only a logician, but he was also a sort of accomplished sort of practitioner, and therefore he had his own supernatural power, I guess. So he vomited a lot of fire from his mouth, and he burned the cave. He burned Dingnaga's robes and the books and all that. And then this is a very important story, actually. Sometimes it doesn't take us it doesn't take us whole people ganging up towards you to give up your good deeds. Sometimes even a small situation could really throw you, and small situation can make you decide, okay, I give up. Because you get, okay, 3-4 days you are debating with this man, you are reasoning with this person, you have really give impressive logic, but still this person is not bowing down or giving up. Instead, he's creating all these harmful activities. So at that point, Dingnaga got so exhausted and so depressed. He thought, if I can't convince one person, if I can't make reason to one person, how can I pledge to enlighten all sentient beings? This is just too much. I'm going to give up bodhicitta vow. So he threw the chalk that because when you take the bodhisattva vow, there's a ritual. As well, when we give up the bodhicitta, you can also create the ritual. And he used this ritual of throwing the chalk in the sky, and he said, when I will throw this chalk, and when this land on the ground, at that point, I have given up the bodhicitta. So that's what he did. And then apparently chalk never came down. And then when he looked up, what happened to the chalk? There is Manjushri holding the chalk. And then the Manjushri said, son, you should never ever do that. That the sort of the negative consequences of giving up the bodhicitta is just incredible. You would rather go to the worst hell realm. You would rather go to the worst hell realm than giving up the bodhicitta, because you are basically giving up the not only your opportunity, but you are giving up the opportunity of liberation of many, many others. So therefore, it is very grave. There's many, many stories like this in the Mahayana canons. And so this is what is stressed by Śāntideva here also, that only the Buddha can tell the consequence of the giving up the bodhicitta. So, okay, so to summarize, he's saying that, well, now that we have taken the bodhisattva vow, he's addressing to the Mahayana students, by the way. It is important that first we analyze this path. And even though our analysis is very questionable, we must trust the analysis and experiment that all the past bodhisattvas have done and the Buddhas have done. And now that we have taken the bodhisattva vow, one should not even think of deceiving the sentient being by giving up the bodhicitta. In this, and then he goes on to talk about how a bodhisattva is so important by expressing that if a person interferes a bodhisattva's activity, such a person will dwell in the lower realm endlessly. Because imagine even to interfere a happiness of one sentient being, how much that can destroy ourselves. Here, by interfering a bodhisattva, you are interfering so many sentient beings' happiness and liberation. If a bodhisattva end up practicing the bodhisattva path and again engaging into breaking the bodhisattva vows, such kind of alternating negative and virtuous and non-virtuous action will only lengthen the duration of a bodhisattva to achieve the bhumis or the enlightenment. Therefore, the bodhisattva must, with a good intention and the determination, apply the bodhisattva path, thinking that if we don't apply this bodhisattva path, even the thousands of the Buddhas can walk upon this earth, I will not be able to be saved. And while roaming in the samsara, I will be subject to all kinds of suffering of being bound, cut, etc. Here, we have such a precious opportunity. The Buddha Tathagatas have came on this earth. You will hear this kind of expression a lot in the Mahayana Sutras. We talk about how precious this life is. And when we talk about how precious this life is, one of the most important attributes is usually that the Tathagatas have come. Tathagatas have came on this earth. This I don't know whether how you are understanding this, but for the Buddhist, to be able to have an example or a model, to have some sort of a reference of the fact that defilements are temporary, enlightened quality can be achieved, is so important reference. And it is believed in the Buddhist teachings that there are times and there are places where Tathagatas may have not come yet. And in this kind of situations, virtuous reference is non-existent. If the virtuous reference is not non-existent, then this is basically an experience of degenerated time and degenerated place. To the certain extent, some parts of the world, we go through this kind of experience. We could say now in our modern time, for instance, like this. In the past, in India, for instance, the great kings and the emperors of India, they would venerate, they would prostrate to the feet of these sannyasins, monks, bhikshus and bhikshunis, philosophers. They would spend hours and hours discussing things with them. Not only the kings, but the villagers. People generally look at these sadhus, monks, as equal to today's Harvard researchers. They would look at them as these are the people who are searching for truth. These are the people who have dedicated their life searching for the truth. And they might find the truth. And by finding the truth, they might tell us what is the truth. They're doing a benefit for us. They're making our life easier. Because I can't do this alone. I am so attached to my own household, my surrounding. Yet this person is doing it. So that kind of veneration. Now, in this day and age, to a certain extent, our reference to such kind of value is waning. So one could say that the presence of the Tathagata for many people does not exist. But for some of us, we feel awkward. We feel awkward to this complete life. We have family, we have job, we have good circumstance in the situation, but we still feel this is not final. We still feel awkward. No one, I guess not. No one has been to enlightenment. I haven't. Probably you haven't. Yet, there is a certain attraction to enlightenment. And intellectually, we sort of know that enlightenment is great, but no one really knows experientially. It better be good. It can't be bad. The one thing that we know is that we are not satisfied with this, what we have. And this dissatisfaction to what we have triggers to look for much more profound and higher reference. And this kind of quest, this kind of longing then produces the presence of the Tathagata, the enlightened being. So, Śāntideva is saying that such an opportunity, such a situation, the fact that the Tathagata existed, we have a certain adoration to this Tathagata, we are equipped with a certain sense of feeling awkward to our life. We have longing to something that we don't have reference with. Such kind of vessel is a perfect vessel to increase the ability to habituate ourselves with the virtue. We are able to habituate ourselves with the virtue. It's not as we don't have that ability. Just as we have the ability to accustom to get accustomed with non-virtuous thing, we have the ability to be able to be accustomed with virtue. This is rare. And we have it. And yet, this life is temporary. This precious human life or the body could be only one time. Judging from the way one perform our activities, judging from the way we think and way we intend, more likely we will not be able to achieve such kind of opportunity again. And if we don't have this kind of opportunity of being a human, we will only know non-virtuous. We will be forced to be non-virtuous. When such kind of condition arise, what can a feeble person like we do? We don't have the force of virtuous actions and thoughts. We have not accumulated any of them. Instead, we have accumulated a lot of non-virtuous thoughts and actions. The only consequence of this that is that we will not even hear the sound of the happiness for a long time. For this reason, Tathagata Buddha have said that the precious human body is so difficult to obtain, with the analogy of a blind turtle and stray yolk accidentally meeting together is so rare, but even rarer is obtaining the precious human body. And while we go through lower realms, in this lower realms, we will only increase more non-virtuous thoughts and actions and increase more karma and reaction of the karma, more birth, more old age, and more death. Therefore, a bodhisattva who has now obtained such a precious human body, if we don't put diligence in getting accustomed to virtuous thoughts and actions, then there is no greater self-deception. There is no greater ignorance than that. And even knowing this, if we delay our bodhisattva duty, when the death comes to our life, we will be tormented by the regret and the suffering. Through the negative actions and thoughts, we will create more negative, we will go through more negative consequences, such as the hell realm. Such a mind is like mind that is under the spell. What lies within this mind that is so self-deceiving? What is in, now Śāntideva is beginning to introduce negative emotion here. What is there inside us that is destroying ourselves? Emotions such as anger, jealousy, pride, these are our real enemy. But actually, in reality, they have no feet, no hand, they have no physical body. They are not even courageous or clever. Yet they have managed to slave us. They have dwelt within ourselves, and they have made themselves at home within our being. How can we not be angry towards such kind of emotion? I think this is Śāntideva used this kind of method of, I think this is kind of a poetry, like to Śāntideva saying that there is one that you should be really impatient to your negative emotions. Yet you are patient to your real enemy. Such kind of a patience is disgraceful. You should be impatient to your emotions. All these emotions are so grave. For instance, like all the gods and asuras, they can all in combine destroy us, yet they cannot take us to hell realm. But with this emotion, the enemy emotion, they can take us to the hell realm instantly. All the external enemy that we have, external enemy that we have, are not, they are temporary. Their history is not long. Whereas our inner enemy, the emotion, they have been with us from the beginningless time. External enemies can be, we can engage with the dialogue, we can lure them, we can appease them with presence, with venerations. The internal enemy, even if we try to appease them and try to make friend with them, they create more harm and suffering to us. This enemy emotion, they have decided to dwell within us. They have decided to park or make home within ourselves. So how can we not, how can we relax, basically? How can we how can we be, how can we get distracted, or how can we even feel comfortable while we have this enemy within us? this hell's guardian, the emotions, this enemy that is taking us to the hell realm, they're dwelling with us comfortably. How can one relax? How can a bodhisattva must generate the diligence of thinking that until we uproot this inner enemy that is dwelling within ourselves, bodhisattva must generate the determination to never give up. Ordinary people, for a meager gain or because of a meager loss, a small loss, they would go to the battlefield. They would go through all the pain and endurance. They will go to, they will endure all the pain and hardship and not return until they have taken the revenge or they have achieved what they want to achieve. This emotion that is the cause of all the suffering, 100 different suffering. How can we relax until we overcome the cause of all this suffering? Ordinary people, ordinary beings, by going to the battlefield, they return with the scars in their body and boast about how and how they fought in the battlefield and boast their scar as an ornament. Here, Bodhisattva may go through pain of overcoming the pain when the Bodhisattva is going through the battle with a powerful enemy of emotions. And at times the Bodhisattva will get damaged and have scarred. But the Bodhisattva must remember that he is doing this for the benefit of greatest greatest benefit. So Bodhisattva has all the reason to overlook this kind of pain and endurance. Fishermen, farmers, for meager gain of food and shelter, they go through all the endurance of heat and cold and all kinds of calamities. Here, a bodhisattva who has pledged the happiness of all sentient beings must learn to endure all the pain of overcoming the emotion. A bodhisattva has taken the vow to liberate all sentient beings from this emotion, yet a bodhisattva himself is not liberated from the emotions. How can a bodhisattva not be mad being, mad person who pledges such kind of vow? Therefore, a bodhisattva must again and again generate this determination to never return to the world of emotion. Bodhisattva must learn to have grudges towards the emotion. This kind of emotion is what the bodhisattva must have for the time being. A bodhisattva must think, no matter what happens to me, I could get killed, I could get my head chopped, but no matter what, I shall not bow down to my enemy, which is emotion. External enemies can go out. You can expel the external enemies, and then they can go somewhere else, and they can regroup themselves. They can strengthen themselves and then come back. And yet, this internal enemy, the emotion, is not like the external. This is this is quite important. This raises a question here also. Is it really possible to uproot all the negative emotions? Can we really destroy them to the extent of the emotions never returning again? Here the Śāntideva has give us a glimpse of the Buddhist concept of Tathagata Garbha, which of course is much more explained in other shastras. But in this shloka, he talks about how external enemies can go, you can expel them, but they could regroup, they can strengthen themselves and come back and fight back. But the internal enemy, the emotion, once you destroy them, then that's the end of them. They can never return. This is a very important point in the Mahayana teachings about the Buddha nature or the Tathagata Garbha, basic goodness of human being. Defilements are temporary. Defilements are not your nature. Defilements are not your absolute nature. Therefore, if you destroy them from the root, it is possible that they don't grow back again. We could maybe discuss this if you are confused about this later when we talk, if we have time for question and answer. And then I want to just go through these stanzas. The next stanza is really important, which also concludes this chapter. Lastly, Śāntideva was saying, "Nyamonamni yunamini wansolamni banami tele jenamina teta kanen dovakuna yu dini junratichi nyingna jikpo shechiri tsamba ten temeting the dala nyasonamzu chitin che." This is the towards the end of the 4th chapter. Here, all along we have been talking. Śāntideva is talking about how emotions, we have to have grudge towards emotion, how we should not bow down to emotions, how can they dwell with us and then make use of us, how can we, listen to them. They have never given us peace. They have basically abused us. They have been, freeloading within us all the time, so on and so forth. But towards the end, then chapter gets concluded by Śāntideva saying, but where is this emotion? These emotions are not in the object. These emotions are not in the subject. These emotions are not in the sense, neither on the sense objects. They are not external. They are not internal. They are not in between. They are illusion. They do not exist externally. They do not exist inherently. And then here's a nini jundatiji nyingna jikpong shishi tsumpa. Bodhisattva should not be afraid of these emotions because they are like an emotion. This stanza, as I have been keep on repeating whole morning, portrays the classic Mahayana path. You understand? Classic Mahayana path. Everything is like this. We talk about all the detailed path. Even if you, for instance, when you read Vajracchedika Sutra is like that. It begins with a Buddha folding his robes, washing his begging bowl, placing it on a mat, him sitting sitting straight, and then all these descriptions of the setting, and then the teachings. And towards the end of the teaching, Buddha asked Subhuti, has Buddha taught? And the Subhuti said, no, Buddha never taught. And then Buddha applauded, saying that that's the right understanding. Always combining the relative truth and ultimate truth, so to speak. Here, exactly this is what Śāntideva has done. We talked about how emotions are bad, how emotions are dwelling in us, how emotions are destroying us again and again. We need to really watch out. They are really bad. They have been with us for a long time. We are made to almost believe this is such a daunting task. And towards the end, Śāntideva says, but emotions are illusion. Therefore, you should not be afraid. A bodhisattva nyingla jikpong shechiri tsampaten, bodhisattva must not be afraid of emotion because they are illusion. They are not truly existing force. With this understanding, bodhisattva will have a courage. Remember, bodhisattva means courage. Changchup sempa. In Tibetan, we call it sempa. Pao is like a courageous warrior. How do you become warrior? In this, you become warrior with a determination to help all sentient beings, but also having the wisdom to realize that when we say all, it means, the all is something vague. The word all, the all infinite, all sentient beings creates a fear, but wisdom of knowing that all is an interpretation, all is not a truly existing phenomena, it is an imputed phenomena. With this wisdom and compassion, Bodhisattva began this journey of the Bodhisattva path. And here, the last shloka is what is being described in the previous shlokas should be applied to the action. What is the point of not listening to a physician if you need to cure your ailment? And that is the end of the 4th chapter for this morning.